extended. Okay. Good afternoon, Rick. You're the only one here. Notice it's hereby given that the City Council of the City of Alpine, Texas will hold a workshop at 3 p.m. Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021 at City Council Chambers at 803 West Holland Avenue and via Zoom conference in the City of Alpine, Texas. Meeting login details may be found at www.cityofalpine.com. This notice is posted pursuant to Texas Open Meeting Act, Section 551043, Texas Government Code. Members of the audience will be provided an opportunity to address the council on any agenda item after determination of a quorum and proof of notice of the meeting. Zoom meeting guidelines and procedures may be found on the city website. Remarks will be limited to a total of 3 minutes per person. Please speak into the microphone located at the podium and state your name and address for in-person attendance. When addressing the council, please introduce yourself by your first and last name and state out loud the ward that you reside in or have business interest in. For public comments made by virtual attendants, please email your name and the ward that you reside in or have business interest in. For public comments made by virtual attendants, please email your name to the meeting moderator at g.calderon@ci.alpine.tx.us. If you do not live or own property in the city, please state that in your email. If you have a petition or other information pertaining to your subject, please email to the city secretary beforehand at city.secretary@ci.alpine.text.us. State law generally prohibits the council from discussing or taking any action on any issue not included on the agenda. But if appropriate, the council may schedule the topic for future discussion or refer the matter to staff. No personal attacks on council members or city staff members will be allowed. The mayor or city council members may call upon order to stop personal attacks or meeting disruptions. If an individual continues to personally attack elected official or staff member in a meeting, they may be barred. Call this meeting to order. We'll have the pledge. Please rise and turn your cell phones off. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you all very much. City Secretary, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mayor, we do. Council Rodriguez is not present. The rest of the council members are, and the notice was posted at 2 p.m. on July 30th, 2021.
Okay. Anybody gonna make any public comments?
No.
Yeah, no one signed up for it. Okay, let's go ahead and go to item 4, workshop. Interim Secretary, City Manager, I'm sorry.
This is our second budget workshop. The first one we kind of discussed priorities, needs, the survey questions, a lot of feedback. So I took all of your considerations and I put it back into the number side. The first, so the budget has, the main fund. So you have your general fund, your water, wastewater, sanitation, your airport, tourism, gas, and then your debt. I did send out a rough draft of the proposed budget. It is currently not balanced. There's additional input from today's meeting that I can go back and add, and then either remove a few items, reconfigure a few items so that we can get it balanced. But I wanted you guys to have something to actually look at for this go round. After today's meeting, once we kind of go through this, I will get it finalized and balanced so that we can post it online for the public and anyone else who wants to come by and visit and look at it. The first big section, of course, is the general fund. If you look at the first page of the workbook, we're currently 1.2 million short to a balanced budget. But there is some wiggle room, I call it. I do take a more conservative approach when looking at the budget. A lot of the decrease in the revenue side comes from the interest rates. Over the past several years, the city has not met what we've budgeted by any hopes or dreams. Unfortunately, the interest rates just aren't climbing to where we would like them to be. So you'll see a significant drop from the interest rates on all of the departments. Some of the main things or discussion points I've put up on the screen for each of the different funds. They're all kind of in line with each other. So excited, got some information back. And then at 4 o'clock Friday, I found out that things are changing, are going to change with our insurance. One thing that needs to be addressed, of course, is our longevity. We were finalizing and updating exactly how much longevity costs for each department, each fund. We do keep a master spreadsheet. It was going back and updating it. We've had some turnover, some changes, addition of new employees, so we need to update that. We're not talking significant amount of money, but it still needs to be taken into consideration. Our health insurance. Last year, the city signed into a 2-year agreement with Blue Cross Blue Shield. So they have these Passover rates. It's part of the pandemic concerns where insurance companies, basically, they don't make changes, they don't adjust. We thought we were in line with that. Blue Cross Blue Shield did not make any. They did a rate pass, but our Humana, which covers our dental and vision, did not. Once again, it's not huge numbers and changes, but it's something that still needs to be taken into consideration and addressed. Currently, we provide full insurance for our full-time employees who wish to take it. We have a few individuals who their husbands or wives, mother and father provide a better coverage, so they stay with that individual. We provide medical, health, and dental. We also cover a percentage of our dependent coverage. Depending on family, spouse, and children, the city covers anywhere from 40 to 50% of that cost as well. So that's an additional kind of an expense that we have the ability to cover through our health insurance fund, but I just wanted you guys to be aware, sustainability wise, the city may not be able to cover that forever. No funds go into the health insurance fund. This is what is partially left over from when we were self-funded. The other thing that we included this past year was an HRA. So because we did change our insurance, the rates changed, our deductibles changed, our co-pays changed. The city provided $750 per employee on a prorated base. So if you were employed with us October 1st, you got $750 for the year to cover your co-pays, your over-the-counter medications, your prescription medications, as kind of a balance to, we just increased everything else. Once again, this gets covered out of our health insurance reserves. Sustainability, long-term, this does need to be looked at. I am proposing looking at not doing $750 for this upcoming year, but doing $500. Of course, if you get hired May and you're not eligible until August, then you would only get enough for August and September because this is all prorated. So you don't get the full amount once you start. The other big thing is our unemployment. We got hit hard. It's nothing that we could have prevented or changed. Texas did recalculate. I did make the first initial payments despite not having a set tax rate off of our unemployment rate, sorry, off of our prior year. Prior year was 1.6%. That's a good little number, not too much to worry about. We are currently set at 2.8%. So that is a slight significant change. Going back and refocusing and budgeting that correctly. So what you have in the packet for our unemployment for the departments is kind of like an average. Wasn't quite sure how far up we would go or how far low we would go. Finally got it confirmed, so I'll need to go back and make a few adjustments. Also, one of the items that we talked about, of course, is the 3% and the 5% for non-exempt and exempt employees. I have currently reached out to get classification help. Our employees get classified certain ways, whether they're exempt or non-exempt. I know that this has been a conversation prior, and I just really would feel better knowing that if an individual is exempt, that they're classified correctly. So I have reached out to another city who actually has a SHRM certified human resource director, and she's providing guidance and possibly an outside company that does this for a living kind of deal. We currently have about 13 exempt employees, and then the rest would be considered non-exempt. It does make a difference when you take into consideration overtime, flexibility of schedules, responsibilities. So one of the things we're working on is that. Currently the budget is set at the 3 and 5. It may change, but of course this is a living document. It can change throughout the whole entire year. But just so you are aware, that's the direction that I'm currently going. Also, we are updating our job descriptions. Over the past year, departments have reclassified, described their employees and positions and created and removed. We want to get those all kind of settled into the same format, following our same guidelines of starting in an ending pay range, and what are their responsibilities, not just an overall view of what they're supposed to be doing. I think it helps, especially when we advertise. What we have online is not necessarily what the department has for them. So we want to go back and clean that up so that everything gets updated. Some of the big things that were discussed during the last meeting was our CIP and some of your priorities. So this budget does break down paving, the crematorium, the HVAC system, a spray and neuter program, additional leased vehicles, a fleet maintenance facility, a mower for the parks, and the Pueblo Nuevo park match. It also does include some planning services under building services. So these are all additional expenses that weren't there prior that we put into the packet or the budget so that we can kind of go from there and see what would be the best entrance of the city. Paving was your all's #1 priority. So we did break down the paving. Looking at how we've been currently doing it, having Eddie's team do a seal coat program and having a vendor do a rebuild program, taking it from those 2 different directions. Speaking with Eddie, he's confident that over the next 5 to 10 years, if the city continued on that rate, you would have a huge chunk of the city completed, and it would go back into just an all maintenance program until we really needed to start repaving again. Mr. Johnson, Councilman Johnson also stopped by and inquired on some of the additional streets that we need to look into, including the Alpine Country Club. So there is some funding put aside for that as well. The city can't redo the whole section and the whole entire area. The thought process was doing a little piece by piece. There are some areas that are worse than others. Prior, some pieces had been taken care of, so it's kind of picking up for that. It's one of those, you use it until there's no more. There's no, we're gonna give you more, we're gonna give you more. We put a little bit aside and then just build up over time. So you'd be taking all the streets from the 3 different areas. The section, of course, that's a little bit further outside, but inside our city limits. The seal coat maintenance paving projects, and then you would have your rebuilds by Jared Dirt Works. On a side note, we continue to get pushed back with paving. I did have to sit down with Jared, kind of get an understanding of what was all proposed, the locations. I'm a visual person, not a, well, it's this road, and this road. You have to actually show me on a map because it doesn't, I'm just a visual person. So I visited it with him and Eddie and kind of looking at the direction and what's been proposed. So his contract, of course, was for the 2 years. It will have to be extended in order to encompass everything that had already been approved, because this lovely rain that we all love so much has pushed everything back. He did have some family issues come up before he could start the projects, so he's pushed back a little as well. He is confirming with me certain areas. The big concern right now is the school, Alpine High School, and the roads in that area that have been torn up because it does affect their bus routes and We have a utility project that has to be completed as well. So those have been put on my radar to make sure we get accomplished in a timely manner. So if you see some dirt roads not being taken care of, it's because I have requested that the high school area, once that traffic starts up, which technically was yesterday with athletics, we don't tear up the dirt roads any more than we need to.
Do we have an idea of when they're gonna open up Fighting Buck all the way to the loop?
So I don't know the beginning and the middle, but I got the end. I don't know what happened to close it. I sent a message. Becky had reached out. She was concerned because school is starting up. So they got a new water tap or taps. They were put in. The location of them is incorrect because it's on the road. So they have to have a traffic rated box or cover or something to protect it from all the traffic running over it, which has been next to impossible for them to locate. So the utility department came up with the plan B, and they're gonna actually put in manholes to cover the existing taps. And those are traffic rated, so you can have buses and everything. So those should be completed by, I wanna say the 25th of August. I think that's when school starts. That was their deadline. So they've already ordered them. Once they get them in place, the road will be opened back up.
Okay.
Right now, we don't want traffic running over a hole in a meter. So they have found the solution. We're just hoping that it does work in our favor. So like I said, they've already done their part. Now we're just waiting for the parts to come in and that project will be done. Hopefully we'll time it just right with Keith. I know if you haven't seen him around town, he's kind of going crazy, and then it rains. The two for the crematorium and the HVAC. So the HVAC is kind of an important aspect for them. They have the smaller unit with the bigger building. They have all the animals. It's just becoming more and more of a concern because they're operating off of swamp coolers. They're not as reliable. They've had a lot of maintenance on them. So we have included that in this year's. It is part of the CIP. The crematorium is also an item that Jennifer expressed a lot of interest in, even if we couldn't afford to buy it, but maybe to put some money aside for it this year as part of our CIP. The reason for this, they do a lot of cremation of not just like your pet that you've lost and you want to cremate it, but a lot of the animals that are picked up, including wildlife. The current crematorium doesn't cover your deers, your larger animals. There is an expense to dispose of them at TD at the landfill. It's just, that's how the contract is kind of set up. So for her, it's kind of we could get rid of the little pit that they have where they dispose of them currently, which is by the animal shelter. Get rid of that little pool of animals and get them either to TDS at an expense or get the crematorium that is slightly larger. Currently the crematorium that they have is small, and it's, if they do a cremation, you have the option as a resident to do it, by itself. You want your own animal cremated or with others. Most people go by themselves. It's just, I think, a memorial memory thing. You don't want to think otherwise. So it ties up a lot because it's just the one little piece of it that they can use. Some of the ones that she's been looking at have increased the number of units that are within it. So you could do 3 or 4 at a time, would reduce the amount of gas being used, reduce the amount of time, and then of course it being larger. So I included that.
Is there a space for it out there?
Yes. Location is not an issue though.
That's good.
One of the other items is the spray and neuter program. Jennifer is very well aware that, this is kind of one of those we'd like to help deals, but if it's not possible, we understand that as well. I did keep it separate in her budget, because this is something we would be doing to help not only our community, but also the Humane Society, who currently picks up most of those bills on behalf of residents. It's been brought up a couple times at the Alpine Animal Advisory Board. This is the way you're going to kind of get your feral populations to decrease. And Currently, is it Burton?
No, it's
Culvert.
Culver, Patsy Culver.
Patsy Culvert pays out of pocket for a lot of it. The Humane Society, they get donations. A couple of the vets, we have two, have helped out with decreased expenses.
They are
in that.
decreasing them drastically to help with this program. Yeah.
With the beds, you know?
Yes, Dr. Mary, Dr. Dodson, and I don't know that Ray's doing it anymore, Dr. Allen.
Dr. Allen does help us on occasion.
Okay.
We do have, we kind of split the bills between the two. We don't go to one or just the other. We go to both.
Okay.
So I included it in here as well. It's another, animal control has a lot of programs that they offer through the Humane Society. This one kind of is for them to take a hold of and help the community more than just taking your animal away from them. It's that positive side to give back to the community. Leased vehicles, we didn't make very many adjustments with that. We kind of have a 50-50 mix on leased vehicles. Currently, the police department and the water department have the highest number of leased vehicles. PD has requested additional leased vehicles, and it's an additional expense because they have to be outfitted. So it is a capital improvement, but we recorded under the leased aspect that we're required to under government accounting.
How long are these leases lasting on those?
So it varies. We actually have four that can remember off the top of my head that are 3-year, and then we have 5-year.
Y'all are pulling the equipment off when they take them back and having.
We haven't had to. We're coming up to the 5th year. So there's the deciding factor of you do get more value if you turn it in, not for PD at this moment, but for like our utility trucks that have the big beds and changes. You do get more value turning it back in with all the equipment. But then it's kind of one of those, is it gonna cost the same to just put a new one on? So we haven't come up to that. That was one of our discussions in early April, beginning of May. We didn't get enough feedback from the departments to make the decision in a timely manner. One of the things that Enterprise does look at is the mileage. It was underestimated when we went into this, and I had that conversation with Justin, and I apologized to him. I was like, well, you had vehicles that you weren't sure were going to get to A to B, and then you gave them vehicles that got to A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So they took advantage. They drove where they needed to go. Whereas before they were a little bit more like, I don't know if the vehicle's going to break down on me. So the mileage is a little bit higher than they had anticipated. And we were going to try to return early and get newer ones, but we didn't meet that deadline. So currently PD is the only one requesting 3 additional vehicles.
And how much are they telling you it costs to outfit one, maybe?
About 5,000 minimum. That's for the basics. That's
very basic.
Yes. We have a lot of equipment that we can pull off other vehicles that's still usable.
That we own,
Yes.
but it's old equipment, that
It's older.
equipment ends up outdated real
Yes.
quick.
So Alpine hasn't done very well with keeping up with technology, and it's really hard because we can't just do it. We kind of have to plan for it. So the first thing for them would be the vehicles, and over time we look at different grants. We look at additional, you know what, you're not utilizing as much of this. Let's move it in and get you a couple more extra pieces of cameras, lights, whatever's needed. It's really hard to just kind of like, you want to just start clean and fresh and get everything that everyone needs to be able to do their job, but you don't have all the resources to do it. So it's prioritizing, okay, we need the vehicles because we don't have enough vehicles to have for all of our officers or all of our employees that need one, and then outfitting them and equipping them. And so it's hard.
PD has to have vehicles, and they have to have the equipment, or there's no sense in them going on a call. They're wasting their time if they don't have the right equipment in that vehicle.
Yes. So they're the only department.
Just a personal opinion.
They're the only department who is getting additional leased vehicles at this time.
Okay.
Is it cheaper to lease them than buy them?
So we've looked into that. And this is why I say we're kind of
I know.
50-50 right now, is one of the benefits that was provided under Enterprise was the maintenance side. So we're not liable for all the maintenance.
Such as?
So oil changes, anything that goes with the motor, any recalls.
So if we have it done here, if we have somebody change the oil here, they'll pay for it?
Yes. So we don't pay any of those fees, which if the city properly maintains the vehicle and takes them in every, 3,000 miles
But they
every
should
3
be,
months.
they are, doesn't Robert have a huge schedule for them? That's
I
gotta be,
can't answer that.
I'm sure that's set in place.
Yeah,
I'm
see,
sure
I can't answer
somebody
that.
over there has that set in place.
I just get the notifications when there's safety recalls, and then I send them out to them, hey guys, you need to get this taken care of. The 50-50 part of it is a lot of some of the items we need done, we have to take to a dealership.
I know.
Because we're located where we are, it's a little bit harder, especially when you have to have an employee actually leave to go do it. Sometimes you need 2 of them or 3 of them to
Drop it
drive
off,
2 or
right,
3
right.
different vehicles.
And are they working with Stockton Ford for all that?
Ford and there's the Dodge one, because we do have Dodges. We've gone to Kelly Grimsley a couple times. We've had some issues with them.
Then your
so we're
biggest
not-
thing is to get the same kind of vehicle and find the best vendor and don't have a Dodge and a Ford and a Chevy.
So that's where
Only have
PD
Ford.
is changing to
Okay.
go.
Okay,
All of our other departments have Fords except for the Chevy that's out here.
okay.
That was just a timing thing. Getting lease vehicle also, it doesn't happen overnight. This is where I indicate to Chief Martin, we know that we're not gonna utilize the additional cost because we budget for the year, but you're not gonna get your vehicle till February. You have those first few months of a little extra money that you can put towards additional equipment or needed things. So we always budget for the year. Reality is Enterprise will come back and kind of be like, okay, well, we can get it for you in maybe January or February. Oh, you know what? I got one right now. We can get you one, but not the other 2. So we kind of prepare we want it all October 1st, but we understand that it may be some delays.
Well, and now with the shortage as well, that's another issue that's
We
come
have
up.
the vehicles, there's just no chips to put in.
Mhm.
No biggie.
So, and that's why PD is the only one who's getting these vehicles, follow up that direction. The facility, fleet maintenance facility, that was actually part of this year's budget. Timing hasn't allowed for it to happen. So I did include it for next year under building maintenance. This is to extend the yard's current warehouse to allow for more room for the mechanic. It's not just your heavy equipment that has to be worked on, but it's also all the city-owned equipment, including the smaller items. It's not just vehicles, it's your mowers, it's your tractors, it's your
Weed
heavy equipment
eaters,
from,
everything.
yes. So it's kind of important for them to have the space. Eddie's kind of been asking for something like this for several years. So it's one of those, let's just throw it in there and see what happens. He has done all the research. He's gotten some estimates and some quotes and what it would cost and who could do what. He's kind of fenced off the area where he would like it. It is part of the CIP as well. The mower for the Parks Department. So you got to bear with these guys. They do take care of 13 parks plus all the city facilities. And I asked them for a schedule this year. It's probably the hardest thing I did for them. Wasn't for them, it was for me. It's keeping up with the mowing here and at the visitor center and the old Sunshine House and the animal shelter. PD and the water department have kind of taken over their own, and gas does their own thing as well. But it's understanding between the parks, everything else they're doing, all the maintenance, and then all the little projects, and then all these buildings. They're kind of rotating through their mowers to try to get them all to last. They've bought 2 over the past 8 years, but these are used regularly, including out at the airport until last year when we got them the mower. There is the USDA grant, and I've already talked to Mr. Perkins in regards to how this would work. So the USDA grant would provide about 40 to 55%, I can't remember the exact number, of the cost. So we had put in our CIP for about 20,000, a little over 20,000. Looking at what Robert has currently and ideas of what he would like, we could go out for this USDA grant. We have a very good shot at getting it. They pay a portion and then what we budget would cover the rest. So instead of getting a $20,000 mower, we would get more along the lines of a $45,000 mower. So we included that in there as well. They would remove one that they currently are using and kind of have it as their backup. One that if other departments wanted to borrow it, they wouldn't be as hesitant because it's their older one. They're not worried about a new one getting broken or something happening to it. And then the last big item of consideration was the Pueblo Nuevo Park match. So we did get the grant for the Pueblo Nuevo Park. This is doing all the design and updating of it to make it a much more enjoyable place for residents. We do have the matching part. So I went ahead and included the 75,000 for this year. We have it as a CIP for 75,000 every year for 4 years. So this would just be money that we would just pull and put into a reserve. So when we have to start paying the city's portion, we have it there. We're not scrambling trying to find it within our budget. One of the things that we typically do is all the departments under the general fund eventually have to work together with, if I've got a little bit extra, you know, we give to so-and-so, and then if they have a little bit extra, you know, we try to keep it within the general fund. Sometimes we have to go outside the general fund. I did let Eddie know, in regards to his paving, I didn't include some of his CIPs, but he needed to also, well, I take that back. I included the fleet maintenance facility. But to go back and have a realistic look at his budget when he gets towards the end of the fiscal year, if he's not going to expend it, maybe there is some for a small piece of equipment that he needs. We kind of try and do one or the other. We put it all into paving, hoping that we're gonna get all the paving done. It rains 3 months straight. The money either rolls into the fund balance or gets used somewhere else, but to give him the option to buy that smaller maintainer or a dump truck or something that he may need, with following all the procurement process. That's the part that they hate. So overall, you'll if you've had a chance to review, and if you haven't, I do apologize. The revenue decreased slightly. The one thing that I didn't include is that transfer. So this year we included a transfer. It's money coming out of our reserves account and fund balance to cover the expenses, in part for our paving with Jarrett dirt work and some of the items that we knew we may or may not be able to fund. There hasn't been an actual physical transfer made yet. As Jarrett dirt work starts putting in those invoices, that money will start to move that we have in reserves and use to cover his bills, because that's what it was put aside for. Like I said, our interest rates haven't been as high as we would like them to be. Other things that you'll see some of the changes with is our fire department. I didn't include it in the points of discussion, but I was out there in January and we had a discussion over kind of some of their needs. And I know that the volunteer fire department is going through some rocky issues right now. My big concern is their breathing apparatus. There was a complaint filed in regards to that it is outdated and it is a safety factor. So they have funding set aside specifically for them. It needs to be utilized for things of that nature. When it comes to the safety of individuals who are risking their lives for others, it's important that we update that. So I just literally picked a number, went with 50,000. It seems to be a good number. And I put that in the budget as a start. There is dedicated funds for them. I know that the other big concern has been the ladder truck. And that's been an ongoing discussion since I've actually been employed with the city in 2013. So at some point, we will need to either sit down as a community, including other entities, and what we can do to solve that one. If the city chose to go out for debt to purchase that item, that is an option. But I think that if we worked with everyone, Sol Ross, the county, maybe the hospital district, I don't know how much they could do, but kind of like, we need this, it's important, our current one does not work properly. What options do we have? There are grant possibilities as well. I know Marcy had done some research, come up with some information, but I don't believe it led anywhere. So we can get that back on the table. It is not in the budget for the ladder truck, but the breathing apparatus and items are. Some of the other things that were brought to my attention were their uniforms, or not uniforms. I call it a uniform, the protective gear, their coats, stuff like that. It is important to take that into consideration. I don't know if the city has provided it in the past, but I know under the county had obtained several grants and had outfitted them for several years. That would have been 9-10 years ago. So they're still probably using the same gear. So that's also something to take into consideration. These would all be assets of the city. But at the same time, it would be our responsibility to make sure that they inventory, maintain, kind of let us know. There has been a lack of communication. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I know I reached out a couple times. Can't help someone who doesn't want help, but from a safety perspective, after finding that complaint, that does need to be addressed.
They don't have a routine safety check on their equipment, do they?
I can't answer that.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you what they have in inventory. I know that, I think all the entities over the past couple years have asked for an inventory. I know when the city went into the interlocal agreement with the county, we were supposed to kind of have an inventory of who has what,
Mhm.
and that was never produced. The individual who filed the complaint was working on inventory at the time, and that's when it became a concern to him that things were expired.
Yeah, the reason I was saying that there's some that would be still usable while others would be updated, and we wouldn't get hit with such a big expense item at the end of the year.
Yes, and that's an education thing across all of our departments within the city, not just the volunteer fire department. We put Band-Aids on things for a long time, and I understand from the finance perspective, I'm gonna tell you, yeah, Band-Aid it, it's cheaper.
Mhm.
But at the same time,
What's it cost?
after 5 years, it should be that, you know what, you've allowed the Band-Aid, let's just cut a check. And that's why we're at in the place we're at with like the wastewater treatment plant and some of our other utilities. The city tries really hard to keep taxes low, to provide services. But sometimes maybe our priorities just aren't in line with some of the needs of what's going on. And that's gonna happen with any entity, with any place in the, probably in the United States. So it's a hard position the city's currently in. We have overcome some financial burdens. I know when I started here, it was a nightmare. I took on the challenge. I enjoyed it. We corrected it. Everyone was on board. Now we got a little money in our pockets, and it's understanding just because we have the money doesn't mean we need to go buy things. What do we need to plan for? What do we need to put it towards? My biggest stance has always been to avoid debt. The city, it was an ongoing 3 to 5 years, you just went out for debt. We've done excellent with not having to do that. It's building up that reserve to utilize so that when we need the equipment, we go buy it. We don't go back out for debt.
Good.
So every department has, like I said, the salaries, the insurance. No department made big changes in regards to their day-to-day operations as far as field supplies, office supplies. We did look at the utilities from the phone, electricity. We went into new contracts this past year, so that changed our rates so we could lower those a little bit. Some of the things that we may get hit with down the road will be our workman's comp and our property insurance that does fluctuate. I currently have it budgeted at basically what we're paying this year. We've been real lucky. It hasn't increased significantly to be of a concern. So that's my wild card there, taking a chance. Overall, and you'll notice on the front page is all of our positions as well. This budget does include several new positions. We did take into consideration, after having our last conversation, you know, having those resources available to the departments, and people are your assets. So there's additional in streets, animal control. And that's really it. The other ones, it's not additional positions, it's filling the positions that are there. So they're all included. I didn't provide maybe everyone's exact title. I know I put Officer 7. I do know that we have, you know, different levels of officers, and same with the dispatchers. So you have four intermediate dispatchers, but I try to give you kind of an idea of what positions we actually have. That's the big difference too, is the number of positions is what we budgeted. Any questions?
Yeah.
So
Going to-
these part-time administrative assistant records clerk,
So let me.
I'm not big on part-time employees.
And then I understand that. So we have a hard time getting applications for a lot of our positions, and some of them need to be developed into full-time. And this is where I've had to come, he wants a full-time.
It's a full-time.
The understanding right now is a lot of our part-timers, especially in the admin, is to develop them into the roles we need. So part-time records clerk, there's a lot that can be done, but it's getting them established and understanding what needs to be done, how long is it gonna take them, and then over time, put them into that full-time position. We hire a lot of full-time individuals, and then they switch in back and forth. It's happened in PD, it's happened in water, it's happened in admin. So it's establishing the part-time and let them build up into that full-time, because we may overestimate how much needs to be done. We're overwhelmed because we do a little bit of everything, but bringing in that part-time records clerk takes something off of him, but then she may be sitting there a couple hours a day doing nothing.
Well, then find something for her to do. Sure, I'll come up here and give her a hand.
The part-time admin assistant, so that one currently is a part-time position. It's always been cut between two. One thing I failed to mention, I do apologize, is the budget for the municipal court has it as a full-time. If you go with the
So the
part-time,
court clerk right now, this is Alex we're looking at on here. If I'm looking
So-
at this right here, that's Alex.
so she's the
But she's also
part-time.
working part-time for
There
y'all.
you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if she goes full-time
Part-time administrative assistant or the records clerk?
administrative assistant, we don't currently have a records clerk. And our other part-time person resigned, and
Right.
her last day will be Wednesday. So we put that into a full-time receptionist. We really need someone to answer the phones. That is the number one thing that it's really important in this building as a whole, because the 3301 is the primary number that everyone calls for anything in the city.
Which one of these girls was doing that?
All of them. Alex did it, Keela does it, Leslie has helped out, and she's actually in the Public Works Department. Geo answers it, the customer service clerks answer it. We try as a whole in this building to answer that phone, but it's nonstop. The phone's always ringing. So it'd be nice to have that full-time person who had the understanding of.
And that's what you budgeted for right here, that's the reception.
And like always, as other duties as assigned.
Well, yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
So the municipal court clerk position is currently in the budget at full-time. I did break it down as a part-time and a full-time so that you guys could see that there is an option to go either way. I know that we get more tickets coming in now than I think we've ever seen. People, especially just after this last court, people are coming in, they're asking, hey, how do I do my community service? How do we do this? Alex is currently out of the country. She was hired with the understanding that she would be gone. So part of my team is picking up some of those responsibilities as well. So we're all working together, but it would be kind of nice to say, okay, from 8 to 5, you're doing this, you're doing this, and not, okay, what am I doing right now? So we tried to give options. If it's not feasible after putting in some of the changes, I will send out an email, come back and indicate that we would have to keep it part-time.
I'm just not big on part-time people. Part-time people do part-time work. And that's what you're gonna get out of it.
Understand?
And I know y'all have had that. Part-time, in their mind, I'm part-time. And when I go home at 11:30, because I told you I have a class at 11:45, at 11:30, whatever they're doing, if it lasts till 3, it isn't getting done. That's just how I see part-time.
Oh, no, we've
Not a part-time liker.
we've run into a few where they've been hired on an 8-hour work week. So
Really?
I wanted that.
How nice. I started to say, I may apply. Can I have an application? I just think we need to go to all full-time. Full-time, they're more vested. I mean, if you're part-time, you're not vested, and for a little while, you're vested, and that's it. That's my opinion.
They take ownership.
Well, they don't. They're.
Oh, I'm talking about
part-time.
full-time.
I work part-time at the city. Yeah.
With all the perks.
With all the, right.
This is just the general fund overview. I should have switched earlier for you, Rick, I apologize. Like I said, the difference currently is the 1.2. There is a few changes that need to be made according to the salaries and health insurance that I will do. I found out at 4 o'clock Friday. The big difference will be that transfer. I am doing the estimated fund balance of where we'd be at the end of the year. Part of that transfer is basically what we didn't expend this year, carries over into what we call the fund balance. So that would make the slight difference. It also includes that reserve. So Jared, of course, is just starting back up. So we'll get some of his bills and see where we're at towards the end. Your biggest department changes, and you'll notice that the difference, of course, the positive and negatives, your police department, your parks department. Parks, they are at 95,000 difference, but remember 75,000 of it is that grant.
So they've got a total of 13 officers and 1 reserve.
Reserve or unpaid, or they're supposed to be.
They're not unpaid. There are part-time.
Okay, so not paid.
They fill in when needed.
Are they paying them?
Yes,
Really?
yes.
So total of 13 then.
So our wastewater, water and environmental services, same thing across the board. It's, the longevity, health insurance, unemployment, getting those figures recalculated. We are targeting, are budgeting by the number of positions, exempt versus non-exempt, updating the job classifications, updating the job descriptions. This is one department that there are several job descriptions that were created throughout the year. It's putting them back into our format that we utilize. It's kind of a clear cut what we advertise for. And then addressing the starting and ending pay for those positions. One of the things that was kind of, I just threw it out there, we've had issues with the on-call policy. Our utility department plus our gas department is considered on-call. Excuse me, they have a primary and a secondary individual. Anything that happens after 5, these people are required to respond within a certain amount of time. They can be called anywhere between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. And of course, 8 to 5 are regular working hours. During this time, they aren't allowed to have the personal activities. They cannot leave the area. They cannot drink. They're basically stuck to that phone within the city limits. It's varied since I've started on how the on-call policy has been addressed and how they pay and what's considered on-call and the hours and response time. I reached out to the 2 departments that this hits the most. This is our, like I said, our utilities and our gas. Both departments have come back with a policy. They both agreed that the water should not be treated the same way as the gas, and the gas should not be treated the same as the water. Totally understandable. They are 2 very different systems. They both expressed how they would like to set it up, the feasibility of it. They addressed the Monday through Friday, the weekends, the holidays. And it's hard when you pull that short string and you're stuck doing Thanksgiving and Christmas because you only have 4 people and you rotate every 4th week. You're always going to get that holiday kind of deal. So they've addressed this. They've also addressed who would be considered a primary. The primary is the first responder. The second one is if they need someone to back them up. You see the primary and the secondary used more with the water department. When you have a water leak, it takes usually more than 1 person. So they both created their own policies, typed them up, and have submitted them. Because these do have a significant financial impact, it's not only your on-call, but it's your additional hours worked, which affects your overtime. I wanted to make sure to get this cleaned up, formatted so that the policies looked the same as far as formatting, and then present them to council. Both of them did an excellent job. They basically lay it out step by step. It's clearer to read than what we're currently doing. Currently, it's $25 for primary, $11 for secondary, across the board. There's no consideration, anything else. Yes, it's a money saver, but at the same time, both department heads, director and department head, took it from, these people can't do anything else. That they're stuck here for that week. If you review other cities, and I can provide copies as well, a lot of cities do have a higher rate for their on-call because you really want your employee to, like you say, take pride in their job. I'm on call, it's my responsibility. Not calling them and being like, I don't know if they're sober, or I don't know where they're at, but it doesn't sound like Alpine. We have had that happen. So this is addressing it, and it's pride in their own work. They were given the opportunity to take care of this.
Right, so since all your employees, outside employees, take their trucks home or their vehicles home, and you have 2 on call, and if a job takes more than 2 employees, the other ones will not get paid a differential, correct?
No, they'll get overtime.
They just get the overtime, okay.
So
They're
the
not a
second one
primary.
that shows up at my house is only making overtime?
No, if they're
third one.
secondary, they're getting paid secondary, which currently would be $11 a day.
Okay.
If it's the third person,
Which I have.
then it's
Overtime.
just the overtime. Also take into consideration if they're salaried, considered exempt, they're not getting anything,
Right.
which is why we kind of want to clean that side up as well. I left the considerations blank. For the water and the sewer and the sanitation. Jessica Washington did a really good job working with her teams and building up a budget for this year, first time for her. She had a lot of additional new line items. So for systematic purposes, it was easier to kind of combine them so that we could break them down after the budget is approved with more specifics. So a lot of what she's wanting is just to clarify like what her field supplies, to break it down a little bit more. They have a lot of tools. A lot of tools disappear. So she kind of wanted to break down some of her general descriptive into more specific. One of her big projects, or like I repeated, said the big project is the wastewater treatment plant. So I did went ahead and just put 500,000 in the budget for next year. That would cover part of the engineering, moving forward with some of the needed aerators. We're still in process and in line, but this just automatically puts it in there. So as the next projects come along, the money's there for them to do. We have done a task order with Jacob and Martin, who are the engineers that were hired by the city to do an evaluation of the wastewater treatment plant. We're currently on track with the aerator replacement and upgrades, but we wanted them to come in and I had the conversation with Kurt. We want to know step 1 to step 30, and what do we do afterwards? It had been in discussion prior. Jessica went in and reconfigured the priorities. I think after this last big issue she had with losing all the pumps when the lightning struck the plant, was kind of her like, oh, I don't know what we're gonna do. So we went back to Kirk and we said, this is really our priority, is making sure that this plant functions. We know the clarifiers need to be addressed. We know the pumps need to be addressed. We know the aerators need to be addressed. We know the drying beds need to be addressed. We know what needs to be addressed. It's a matter of what order do we need to do it in. You ask the guys and they're gonna tell you just burn it down and start over. Can't really do that. At one point they were like, well, why don't we just build a smaller one right next to it? It still doesn't address the fact that you have a plant that is just, it needs a little help. We are bringing in vendors to address the clarifiers and to clean out that sludge that builds up. If you've never been out there, give me a call. I will take you out there personally. I will keep the windows rolled up.
I just can't wait.
You have to it.
To fully understand. So the bar screen is on our current list. So that's everything comes in, goes through that bar screen. So we're fixing that. And then it kind of goes through the plant in this systematic phase. The next one, of course, is the aerator. That's just keeps breaking it all down because as it goes into the clarifiers, it backs up. It's not thin enough. So all that extra hard material, it just starts to settle. The clarifiers are, I don't know, 30 feet into the ground, maybe less, maybe more. And it just fills up. So we have a vendor that comes in and actually pulls all that out so that they can keep that functioning. Both clarifiers should be working simultaneously. They do not. We always have one down for repairs or trying to fix something. It's understanding, is that what we need to fix next? Is it the drying beds that we need to fix next? It's just addressing all of those, all the way down to where the effluent water goes to the golf course. When we have a hiccup, as we call it, the effluent water can't go. It gets through that last phase and it's not clean. That last phase should be clear water, not drinkable, but clear. So we're working back with them. We went ahead and threw some money into the budget just so we weren't constantly coming back. As all this goes through, of course, the council will be aware of it. Once we get that evaluation of the wastewater plant, we'll have a better understanding of how do we move forward. The other thing, of course, that was addressed is for them is personnel. You'll notice that we don't have a director currently. We do have a couple applications that have come in, an administrative assistant and a compliance tech. Currently you have one person, Jessica, who does both of those roles. At this point, with the compliance being the TCQ side, it would be beneficial for the city to pull it apart. The compliance person would be required to maintain all of the reports, making sure we have the documentation, making sure all the numbers and samples and what has to be done between water and wastewater, when we need to do our lead and copper, when we need to do systematic reports for TCQ. It's a lot of information, and pulling that apart would definitely be helpful. It's budgeted for 12 utility workers and 3 wastewater treatment plants. In addition, the director and the admin assistant, their salaries are actually split between the two, water and wastewater. So in the budget, the salary for those individuals is split to kind of, they assist both departments. We leave environmental services kind of alone. Adelina does a good job running her team herself. Eventually down the road, it will be recommended to go ahead and move sanitation out. Most cities do operate, sanitation is separated. We haven't done that at the time. It's just gathering a little bit more research and information to make sure we pull them apart correctly on the financial end. Utility billing, 2 of the customer service clerks are pulled from here. Yes, sir.
Going back to the wastewater, how are those guys doing on their license?
They have registered, okay, they completed the required courses to take the test. They both have registered to take the test. One is doing an additional study test, study guide kind of course, and they're registering within the next month to start taking it.
Okay, good.
So they have some deadlines to set. The first one, of course, was just register for it. And they're a little fearful. When you get certified with TCQ, you are responsible for your license. It does not belong to the city you work for. If you make a mistake and it's your signature, you get the fine. We've had that happen. The city has paid the fine on behalf of an employee. But it does get harder when you move up in your certifications, because when you know that you have concerns and hiccups, you want to sign off on it, but you don't want to come back and get fined. You can lose your license after so many attempts or fines or issues. So there's a little hesitation. I've talked with one of them and said, you know what, just go for it. We are moving forward with improvements. It's never not been the concern. It's just kind of always been we bring in a new director, and they've all had great ideas and they've all wanted to do great things, but there's just so much. Now that everything's been pulled back apart, I'm hoping that the next person coming in understands, okay, your wastewater treatment plant, you need help there, and that they maybe spend more time there. They are out in the middle of nowhere. Half the time, people don't even know they're there. So it's just refocusing. Your water guys, you've got a solid team. They have their day-to-day issues, but they work together. They'll always be putting out leaks until the city decides to redo all the infrastructure, but that won't happen anytime soon. So it really is just letting them know and just go for it.
And that's TCQ mandate that they're solely responsible for that fine. Because I feel that, since it's in dire straits over there and it's not their fault, that the city should help them out in some way.
Well, I think every council since I've been here has tried to do something, and there's no one easy answer. I think it's just gotten to the point now where it's like, okay, we just need to just stop like band-aiding in, it's gonna cost money. Do we want to go out for debt? No. This fund is slightly different because the debt would be tied to the payments that come in, the utility fees and that.
Right.
So we don't want to do that. We don't want to do a rate assessment and have to raise water rates or sewer rates. We want to try to use what we have. The city has put money aside, you know, let's reallocate it all back to the wastewater plant and try to accomplish every little task. That evaluation will be important. I think everyone who's come in is like, well, you know, if we fix this, it should fix this. Like I said, everyone's tried something. It's worked for a while, but then it changes. And we do have items out there. We've got dewatering boxes that the city ideally could sell off to maybe a smaller facility. We opted to not use those and go with the belt press. So like I said, it's just the changes, but I think having the confirmation that the city is on board and then bringing in that evaluation will help.
Yeah, because I mean, I can see where those guys are hesitant to you know, upgrade themselves as far as their license is concerned when they're working with something that's
It's hard,
dying.
and you want them to, but then they don't want to be the fall guy.
Yeah, and I mean, you got, you know, two good guys that have worked out there, and you know, I hate to see any of them, you know, fall in dire straits because of that, you know, through no fault of their own.
Fingers crossed. I mean, they seem a little hyped, a little excited, but at the same time, you know, they may just be nice to me.
Well, proof
Oh, I
is,
doubt that, Megan.
yeah, proof is when they go and test.
Yes.
And TECQ knows that we're in this process.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're watching.
They have been very nice over the
Uh-oh.
past couple months.
Uh-oh.
In other words, I haven't had any angry letters.
That's good. I'm glad.
On the water side, the big changes is looking at, you'll see the 200,000 towards Newski's well field. That's actually towards pumps. It's actually going in and getting our pumps. We've been rebuilding, re-outfitting. I've heard so many terms. When they go down, Jessica's going in and reevaluating, is it time that we just go ahead and start fresh? The same with our lift stations. The other big expense that she has in here, I have it under line extension or line maintenance, I'm sorry. Looking at our lead and copper. So we are required to do lead and copper. That has been done multiple years. We are now having to go in and change how we do it, which means we need to go in and actually replace some of our lines that do contain that copper to make them designated testing sites. So this is just an upgrade, and it also includes a little bit of the paperwork and education side of doing these processes. Of course, we have some money set aside for fire hydrants. You've noticed we have several of them that I guess people just like driving into them. I think we're up to 3 that have now been hit. It's going in, getting them fixed.
Or we are charging.
Only if we can find
The
the.
culprit.
Hit it.
So you would think you would see a vehicle with a big dent in it.
They all have
I
big
drive
dents.
around
Yeah.
looking for them. Since I've been here, we've had one that actually paid for it. The city had it fixed, and that individual, because he was caught at the scene, did replace it, or his insurance did. The past 2 that have happened have been basically hit and runs. They haven't hit it hard enough to, I guess, not drive away, but they've hit it hard enough to where it does break off of the stem that goes in the ground. So we've had to replace them. Our fire hydrants are, of course, another consideration down the road. We do need to make sure we inspect them, that they all work properly. Prior, the fire department had helped with that, kind of did an indication of which ones went where. Hopefully we'll get back on track with that. But there are several that we need to get updated, so a little at a time. Of course, their debt, you'll notice that we are not paying the 2003 series. This is the final year. So as of this month, we will make our final payment for that. That is exciting. That one has been in place for some time. So they're down to three. One is completely the water department, and then the other two are actually combined between the general fund and the water department. And then the sewer has their last payment this upcoming fiscal year for their 2012 series. So after this next fiscal year, they'll be done with that one as well. On a side note, and I know it's taken a little bit longer, the wastewater collection contract does, not wastewater, I'm sorry. The sanitation contract does come up in February of 2022. It will start to become an item of discussion in October. This is something that the council really does need to take into consideration. What the city wants as far as a whole. Adelina is going to go do a little survey of those who currently have poly carts and kind of get feedback on how the residents like them. You do have one community that's all they have. They don't actually have the dumpsters. So she's going to do a little research so that we can kind of have that feedback. We do expect it to, of course, increase because every year the contract does increase. So you see a little bit of an increase there. This may not be what we actually spend for the next coming year, but it also may be more, depending on how the RFPs come back. You do have multiple vendors who are interested in our trash collection. At some point, I know it was discussed to have the city take over. We wouldn't be able to do that between now and February. There would be a lot of training, education, hiring of employees, and the biggest part would be equipment. The city currently does not have any equipment that would be able to handle the collection of garbage, let alone the dumpsters or poly carts. So that's a big expense that would have to be considered, whether we go out for debt or we try, to work something out. So for this upcoming fiscal year, that consideration wasn't included. Your airport, same kind of updates. I mean, like I said, this will be across all of them in regards to your salaries and employee benefits. This one has a call out policy as well. And I call it a call out policy, but it's really not what that's called. So after hours, if a plane comes in and wants full service, they call the individual who's on duty, and then they go out and fill up the plane. This can of course be from anywhere from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., 1, 2 in the morning, they get woken up and they get called out. Abel has brought this up a couple times, and Johnny Galvan had it, and Riley has as well, in regards to, can it be kind of a set, and it is a set rate for them. It's not an hourly rate. They don't get overtime. It's a set fee. But they wanted to address it more from your regular hours being one rate, and then like your very early morning hours being a different rate. This rate is also passed off to the pilots. So those who are doing the calling actually pay this rate. But it would be nice for the employee, currently it's just $50, whether it takes them an hour, whether it takes them 30 minutes, or it takes them 4 hours, it's $50. So they're also going to be working on this to make a presentation with changing that. And like I said, this fee does get passed off. So it's kind of the pilot pays the $50, and then we give the $50 to the employee through payroll. So they'll be addressing that as well. Some of the big changes coming up for them that I included, is the remainder of their 10% match for the construction project. So the city currently put aside some additional funding, and $52,586. That money will get transferred into the reserve account. That leaves the remainder $42,414. Texas Aviation had sent out the invoice in July and then followed up with oh wait, you're on hold. So they're going to follow back up with in October. So the city will have to be prepared to cut roughly $95,000 check to Texas Aviation to continue on with the project. The other projects that are coming up is the AWAS as well. Although it's currently on hold until TxDOT finds the additional funding, can release the funding. The city still is responsible for that matching. It is a 25/75. So that will need to be taken into consideration, especially if they say, okay, we're starting the project this year. That's additional funding that's not in this budget. They do have a little bit in reserves. It's about 28,000, a little bit more than that. It's currently can be used to go towards the 10% for this go around. My recommendation would be to use it for the upcoming ones. The city's already basically signed off saying we will do this. I would hate for the city not to have the funding to do it. We have borrowed from the general fund before to cover those expenses. So the airport has done well with trying to put those monies aside, but they really are a balanced budget. What they bring in is what they, you know, spend out. They are a lot harder. You can't predict when people are going to fly. You can't predict the weather. You can make a really good estimated guess, and that's what we were trying to do. We did leave the revenue a little bit the same. We do utilize their ramp program in that we don't do a monthly or quarterly reimbursement. A lot of what we request, we pay big at the end of the year, our bigger contracts for the AWAS maintenance, stuff like that. Instead of requesting $100 here, $100 there, we wait towards the end of the grant period to request it all at once. If you look at prior history, it's between 6,000 and 7,000. When the airport replaced the roof, that was paid 50-50 by that grant. So there are room for improvements. It's just understanding what's available and what's available, not available. They do provide a list of what qualifies. A lot of what we do at the airport, if it has wheels, it does not qualify. Some of your routine bills, your cable bills, your we have a fuel surcharge fee we get charged every month. Those don't qualify. They've been back and forth with things like our filters for our fuel tanks. Some years they have, some years they haven't. So we try to propose as much as possible and then kind of let them go back and take it off. The guys do really good with trying to indicate what's what. It really is just dependent on what they're doing out there. When they do major repairs, obviously we try and get them all covered. So it's, even though it says that it's balanced, that there's a zero difference, there has to be some adjustments made. So we'll go back and kind of determine if we want to use some of that extra money that is sitting in reserve to cover that difference. One of the things that is included, and I did talk with Abel, it really, those guaranteed projects, we just need to make sure that the funding is there. I don't think we really raised anything too much. We actually lowered a few items. Abel did mention, and I had discussed it several times actually, is going out for a new RFP for our aviation fuel. So currently we're under one vendor. The contract we have is actually with the FBO who owned it prior to the city taking over. So that's early 90s. It's getting that updated. That may show a benefit cost for the city. A lot of these fuel vendors come back with additional items that they can provide, including software, how to manage your fuel, how to ensure that you're inventorying it correctly, record keeping, receipts, stuff like that. They are on the oldest software within the city, and that's the Derrick software. So this is a harder one to work through. We are budgeting for 2 full-time employees. This year there was 3 full-time employees where we had budgeted for 2. So there's a little bit difference. So we're just gonna pray that it all balances. No, I'm just kidding. We're just trying to balance it out. And there's so much that I know a lot of people want to get done and they want to make improvements, and we want the airport to grow, but at the same time, you have to have that revenue coming in. And we are limited.
Where are we on the lighting?
The design phase has been completed. We are on the construction phase. The construction phase has gone out for bid. TxDOT Aviation takes care of all of that. They make sure the procurement follows all the state guidelines. There was a miscalculation in the first awarded bid numbers. So they had to go and give it to the second person in line. So they're reconfiguring that. The construction itself has been on hold until this upcoming fiscal year. It's supposed to be this fiscal year. They've moved it to the next fiscal year, dependent on the release of money from the federal side, so that the state can move forward with their projects. So it has been secured, it is in place. It's just now they're getting the funding to move forward with it.
That's on their doorstep.
Yes, and it's the same with the AWAS. The AWAS has been approved. It's now just waiting for them to get in line so that we can get that. When the AWAS is relocated, it actually opens up a ton of growth at the airport for additional hangar spaces. Where it's currently located is regulated on what you can and can't build around it within 500 feet. And then of course the height of it as well. So it does kind of delay us on expansion, which was what we really need to bring in additional revenue. Once it gets moved off, it will open up that whole side. So. And then the third item on the plate is the layout plan itself. This is kind of like the master plan for the airport. This is what Texas Aviation uses to approve further projects. Is it in your layout plan? Has it been approved? They look at your expansion, they look at what you're moving towards, and then they work with you. Tourism. We're doing really well this year, and I don't want to jinx us. We are still under a pandemic. So it really is with the Delta variants coming up, and there is a little bit heightened kind of awareness right now. We don't know ideally what it will do next year. We did budget higher. We went towards the 600,000. I did speak with Chris Rugia, kind of got an idea of what he thought. Because we are over what we originally budgeted for this year. We originally budgeted 425 and we're at 524,000 and we're not done with the year. It's exciting. This is the opportunity that we've had to be able to do some of these bigger projects. The same as far as the employment side. One of the big things for Heather is that visitor center remodel. It's expanding that space and making it more welcoming, getting people in, having it kind of be your meeting focal point for the city. I know when you go to Fort Stockton, there's a train station. You know, it's kind of a cool place. Same with Rhino, it's kind of a train station. You can kind of go. We're taking it, you know, not a train station, but having it where people, it's the middle of town, coming in, there's a nice place to sit, you can relax, there's a bathroom. We don't have a lot of public space, public restrooms, so this will add to it. And then her other big item was just the continued facility improvements. This facility is from the Marfa old barricades, military buildings. And it was moved over here. It's just really maintenance. Maintenance has always been the hardest thing for the city. It's making sure we continue to do that, and update the lighting, the poles in the front that are, you know, slowly rotting away, getting those replaced, making the area in the front a little bit more secure because it really is off of a highway. Not that we want to control children from running into the street, but we do. It's just, everyone does go there. You have that nice little bench out front, but blocking a little bit higher fencing in the front so that, you know, kids don't go out into that busy street. Those are her big focuses for this upcoming year, besides of course all the events and the tourism side, but making that more of a focal point. So that's included in this year's budget. Also included is the part-time position. I know, Judy, you hate part-time help.
What am I gonna do?
We discussed it and had the idea of, let's see how it works. Have a part-time person. The city's had a part-time, the city's had 2 full-time, went back to 1 full-time. Things have always kind of growing and changing. So bringing in the additional help for Heather so that she can actually go do the marketing, talk to the event people, go to businesses. She doesn't want to not work. She just wants the office open while she's doing all the extra things. So having someone there, you know, to cover some of the days or the days that she wants a vacation or a family incident happens, knowing that there's someone there to cover it. Because of the pandemic, most of the information is available on the porch and you can go and pick up
So it's
flyers.
nearly a temporary person, just a helper. Let's not call it part-time.
A helper. Just to fill in when needed. So we did discuss that. The difference that you see the $285.99, excuse me, is actually the contract that was just issued for the visitor center remodel. So that was actually approved by council under the fund balance. So you'll see a transfer. That's what will cover that difference. We will make the updates for, of course, the unemployment rate and health insurance and stuff like that. Chris worked with all of the events, and we'll be presenting that at another meeting with basically I know everyone calls it a little bit different. You have grants or awards. So you have everyone who applied to receive hot funding. They've met a couple times to kind of decipher the different options that are available. We are required by state law to 50% of it has to go towards advertising. So we take that chunk right off the bat. And then we kind of divide it amongst the other categories that are allowable by the state. They had to go back and work with several different event coordinators to get the full understanding of, okay, what exactly are you trying to do? We can't pay for local advertising. We can't pay for giveaways, stuff like that. So they've narrowed it down. Chris will have all of that ready to go, and we'll present it for the council to approve different grants. The main focus has always been advertising. Promotion of arts is the second biggest one. That's your musicians. These are all state regulated. So they have to work within their own little bubble and determine which ones fall under those categories. Historical preservation, signage, transportation, they are specific. So sometimes an event will come in and be like, ooh, I really want to do this and it's historical preservation, but in state guidelines, it's not. So it's having that feedback and that conversation with, okay, what really is your event about? That will be presented. We're hoping, like I said, that, you know, we have another good year and we get back in line. But we went a little high, but we didn't go as low as the 425. The gas department. So the gas department is its own little bubble. They are one of the only funds that does not have debt tied to it, and they're not restricted like tourism for specific items. One of the things that would have to be updated, of course, would be the health insurance, longevity, unemployment. They're the second ones who have that on-call policy that will be presented that outlines. It's a great a great necessity for employees to know. Well, if I work for you and you're going to put me on on-call, what do I get out of it? The policies are really outlined to explain that a little bit better than me saying, well, you get like 25 bucks a day. No, it provides a little more depth. As you can see, it is currently balanced. We will have to make a few adjustments based on the updates to the employee side of it. They are requesting one new service worker. They currently work with a construction foreman, the DIP manager, and 3 service workers. They run the whole department. Your compliance tech is in the office. They do all the primary compliance issues, working with the railroad commission, the work orders. They are asking for another service worker to come in, and then they pay for 2 customer service clerks. So water and wastewater pay for 2, and then gas pays for the 2. That's your billing people. That covered all the bills coming in. The big thing for them, and like I said, they're not attached to any debt. They're not attached to anything that requires them to spend it on specific things, except for, of course, their infrastructure is important. I already sit down with Randy a little bit after the fact. Their request and their main thing is actually all categorized together into the CIP for 21-22. A lot of what he requested could be done within his normal operating budget. It typically is budgeted that way. I went ahead and grouped it all together to give a rough estimate. So the rectifier, we had one that we replaced about 3-4 years ago. There's a second one located towards the golf cart that also needs to be replaced. Randy would do a lot better explaining it to you. I know it helps regulate the gas, and it's an important safety feature. Of course, his trailer, this is to be able to move the backhoes between and your ditch witch and the heavier equipment between Port Davis and Alpine. We do maintain both infrastructures. They're also requesting the HVAC. They have a smaller unit that functions on a regular basis that just needs to be updated to a little bit of a larger unit. And then their bay coverage. This is just so that they can move everything and have it sheltered to prolong the life of their equipment instead of it sitting out in the sun. So 108,000 is what it totals. When looking at trying to balance it, 103,472 is what's currently budgeted. That will slightly decrease once the other information is updated. These are big projects for Randy. The rectifier is a big one for the city. This helps him with just, his needs and trying to get his department running and get all of his equipment better situated. He didn't really request any other big changes. I know that his travel and training are big for him. He does keep his people certified on a regular basis. They do have their, every so many years, they have to go in and the complete department has to recertify. And then he currently has 2 welders. And if he hires a third, he may try to get the third certified as well. These welders, just little background, they're not your normal welders. They are welding on live gas lines. A little bit more detailed work there. They do have to actually do it as part of their testing. So it's not something that they go open a book and take a test. So he has included that in there as well. He said he really didn't make too many changes. He tried to pretty much stay in line. There's a slight fluctuation between some line items, but then you'll see another one decrease, one will increase. Overall, though, his budget from last year to this year is a little bit lower, 144,000 lower. So everyone put in as much information as they could, try to address some of the capital improvement that we have currently in our plan. As the city progresses, grows, and whoever is in whatever position, city manager, city secretary, director of finance, is coming up with that full plan. We know we can't replace huge sections of infrastructure, but if we start planning and actually putting that money aside, it will start to develop. And if we do have to go out for debt, we're not worrying about the first year's payment or how are we even going to start the process. Some of the things to take into consideration, even this year and next year, is legislation has made some pretty big changes and they continue to. So every 2 years, all of our plans, all of your thoughts may be disrupted because legislation has now said you can do this, but you have to get voter approval. I know one of the big things on this go around was any type of debt would have to have voter approval, whereas before that wasn't the case. So it's following with all the legislation guidelines, which leads me to the last one, which I did not do a slideshow for, is our debt. So for our next fiscal year, the general fund, this is your INS, this is the 2-part of your tax rate, is $148,758. The city continues to pay down debt without any issues. So that's a significant factor to take into consideration. The city has not raised taxes. We haven't made any major changes. We're still addressing all the needs and concerns to the best of our capability with the resources we have. We do not have a unlimited wealth of revenue sources. So for what the city has, the city's trying to utilize as much as possible. The tax rate and all of that information, I was just given the truth in taxation report yesterday, and then there was a few errors, so I got a new copy today about 2:30 before I came in here. So that will be addressed, of course, at the next meeting. Of course, you are required to approve your budget, not based off of your tax rate. So you approve your budget before your actual tax rate. But to have those figures, I currently don't have them available until I review the truth in taxation, which is prepared for by the county. They usually do all the input, and then I go back and verify to make sure that we haven't skipped anything. Prior years, you've heard of things being left out and not being accounted for. In our case, it's what's being argued or at the appraisal side, Of course, our new appraised values, and then of course our tax, our debt, those are all taken into consideration. So Sylvia Vega has been working on that with Betty Jo Rooney, and so I'll have more information on that for you. It doesn't pertain to this, but it's information you need from a budget perspective. So the current information in the general fund for the budget side is what we budgeted at this year. And that's with making no changes. So that's my very long spiel. I would love as much feedback, if anything additional you thought of changes. I'd really like to get this up on the website as a balanced proposed budget this week. So if you do have some feedback or information, please don't hesitate. If there's anything you want to throw in there right now, please let me know. I'd like to get as much of this done and corrected. At the August 17th meeting, it will be our first proposed balanced budget in our ordinance. It'll be the first reading. So of course, I'll get this out earlier than that, and then it'll be online for the public to review as well.
Okay, good.
Because it's not balanced and it is a very rough draft, I didn't really want to put that out there for a lot of people to think, oh, they're 3 million short. We're not 3 million short. There's just things that haven't been taken into consideration that we can use.
Okay, all righty. Anything else? Questions? Meeting adjourned. See y'all at 5:30.
Let's see.
Where is it at?